On behalf of our Director, Jeffrey Troutt, and the Board of Trustees, welcome to the York Public Library. We are happy to see you all and thrilled that you've joined us for this evening as we present Rutgers Law Professor David Troutt in conversation with Fordham University School of Law Professor Tanya K. Hernandez. Professor Hernandez is the author of Multiracials and Civil Rights, Mixed Race Stories of Discrimination. This space was originally located on the first floor from about 1992 until last year when it was moved up here. It is named in honor of the late James Library Brown, a librarian, poet, activist, and influencer who was instrumental in making sure that the library seek and maintain books and resources and present programs examining and celebrating the African American experience. We had a grand reopening of this space last week that was wonderful. Some of you may have been here. We here at the library are proud to continue our long-standing partnership with Rutgers University Newark and this evening the Rutgers Law School. As a graduate of Rutgers Law School Newark, I'm especially pleased. Before we start the program, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to mention. The restrooms on this floor are located outside the double doors and to the right. Additional restrooms are on the first floor just under the staircase. We kindly ask that you silence your phones during this program. Should you need to make a phone call, we ask that you exit this area through the double doors and continue your conversation in the atrium. We thank you in advance. Professor Trout's bio is in your program, but please allow me to highlight a few of his many accomplishments. David Dante Troutt is Professor of Law and founding Director of the Rutgers Center on Law, Inequality, Metropolitan Equity, better known as CLIME. He teaches and writes in 4 areas of primary interest: the metropolitan dimensions of race, class, and legal structure, intellectual property, torts, and critical legal theory. His major publications include books of fiction and nonfiction, scholarly articles, and a variety of legal and political commentary on race, law, and equality. Professor Troutt is a frequent public speaker and contributor to a variety of national periodicals, including Politico, Huffington Post, Reuters, and The Crisis. He received his undergraduate degree from Stanford University and his Juris Doctor from Harvard Law School. An avid drummer, carpenter, photographer, ichthyologist, he lives with his wife and family in Montclair, New Jersey. Please join me in welcoming Professor David Troutt.
My name is Stephen. I'm sure I'm asking once. Can you hear me okay? It is a pleasure to be with you all this evening. This is a very special event. It's the first event sponsored by CLIME this year, and we're so fortunate to be able to partner with our friends here at the York Public Library. In order to bring to bear some issues that are almost never discussed in academia, let alone in social conversation, with a scholar who is really one of the most special intellects of our time, and a very dear friend. Tanya K. Hernandez is the Archibald Murray Professor of Law at Fordham University School of Law. She's the Associate Director of the Center on Race, Law, and Justice, and a graduate of both Brown University and Yale Law School. She was our colleague, many of you in the audience are faculty at the law school. She was our colleague for many years, and very dear to us, not only in sharing with us the insights of the work and helping to educate and broaden our horizons on such difficult issues and unexplored issues of race, but also just in her advocacy for the human spirit in the classroom and within the institution of law school generally. Her loss of Fordham has really been a gain for them, but it's our game tonight to hear her talk about her work in this important new book. I do want you to understand the background, and in order to do that, because it's so international, I'm going to challenge myself to pronounce some of these words correctly. Professor Hernandez is an internationally recognized comparative race law expert. a comparative race law expert. Think about that. How many people do you know are comparative race law experts? We tend to think about race in our own particular ways, and we have a sense that the paradigm that works for us is the paradigm that ought to work for everyone. And yet, to be a comparative race law scholar is to recognize the competing paradigms across different kinds of cultures. And it requires a tremendous amount of travel and study and humility and brilliance, all of which she has in abundance. She's a Fulbright scholar who's visited the Université Paris West Nanterre La Défense in Paris and the University of the West Indies Law School in Trinidad. She previously served as a Law and Policy Public Affairs Fellow at Princeton University, Faculty Fellow at the Institute for Research on Women at Rutgers, Faculty Fellow at the Fred Kawamatsu Center for Law and Equality, and is an independent scholar in residence at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture and Equality. Professor Hernandez is a Fellow of the American Bar Association, the American Law Institute, and the Academia Puertorriqueña de Jurisprudencia y Legislación. And one heck of a writer. She's published in numerous university law reviews, Cornell, Harvard, NYU, and Yale, and in news outlets like the New York Times. This is not her only book. Her other book, Racial Subordination in Latin America, the Role of the State, Customary Law, and the New Civil Rights Response, is a singular effort. I mean, her work may be comparative in nature, but very few works compare to that one. Tonight's is very special as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Tanya Hernandez.
That has to be one of the most special introductions I've ever experienced. There's nothing like a writer who you admire saying you're a heck of a writer. It gives you chills. Okay, straight to business. I'm going to chat with you a little bit. I'm going to read with you some short excerpt from the book, and then David and I will chat a little more, and then we'll all chat together. That's the agenda for tonight. So I just wanted to say just a short little bit about the background of the book before I read the excerpt, which is an introduction to my own personal story, actually. I've been a civil rights law professor for over 25 years. And writing this book was a way of trying to sort through my own confusion. It was a confusion about the way in which commentators have talked about the increase in multiracial identified people and the kinds of discrimination they face. And what I found confusing is where they were describing in their articles that mixed racial identity was something that needed to be attended to in a different way in anti-discrimination law. The thought is that our anti-discrimination law is dated and built on a structure of a foundation of whites versus blacks, and of that particular racism, and courts are presumed to misapprehend the nature of discrimination against mixed race people. This view of courts and judges as not understanding multiracial discrimination is one that I wanted to better understand. But when I did a close reading of the cases, what I found was that the discrimination presented by mixed race people, in my view at least, was more accurately characterized as part of the enduring, larger challenge of proving discrimination in court, as opposed to a unique form that requires a whole new conceptualization of civil rights law. Stated differently, in my view, the increase in the number of people who identify themselves as mixed race, biracial, multiracial don't present unique challenges to the pursuit of racial equality, inasmuch as the cases are mired in a very long existing morass of bias against any non-whiteness and its intimate connection to racial privilege. And this, the judiciary understands. When it wants to understand, it understands. So rather than point to a need for a shift away from existing civil rights laws, the stories in the book indicate the need for further support of our current structures that need to be attuned to the operation of racial hierarchy. Okay. And I came to this conclusion after digging deep into the stories of multiracial discrimination that I can uncover. And this brought me back to my own story. As an Afro-Latina navigating Latino, Latina, Latinx, mestizaje, racial mixture. And that's what I'd like to share with you today. An excerpt from the very beginning of the book. Okay, so now this is the book. I don't have it in front of me because the font is too small. And I need it printed out much larger for these eyes. Okay, so here I am. I am the mixed race daughter of a mixed race mother, almost given away because of her blackness. In the 1940s, my maternal grandmother, Lucrecia, was a mixed race country girl, or what her fellow Puerto Ricans called a jíbara, from the mountain village in Puerto Rico. Her African ancestry appears slightly in her trigueña, that is, light wheat color skin tone. That's the best translation I can give you. But was not very apparent in her facial features or her hair texture. Her older sisters were similarly light-skinned and favored their fair-complected mother more than their darker-skinned father. For this reason, Lucrecia and her sisters considered themselves a race apart from those who appeared more unambiguously Afro-descendant. Any tinge of color in the family was attributed to the long-ago legacy of Taino Indians on the island. It was immaterial to the family that the Taino Indians were historically documented to have been exterminated by the Spanish conquerors by the mid-16th century. When my grandmother Lucrecia fell in love with and united herself with a carpenter and guitarist, Juan, her family was not pleased. While he himself was a mixed-race grandchild of a former slave and a son of an Afro-Puerto Rican mother and white Spaniard, his appearance was what Lucrecia's family labeled as black, and thus unacceptable. Puerto Rican identity may claim to celebrate racial mixture, but some of us are thought to look more mixed than others. Dark skin deviations from the idealization of light skin with European features and straight hair are ejected from the Puerto Rican portrait of racial mixture. Lucrecia's family was no exception from this Puerto Rican and similarly Latin American anti-black conception of racial mixture. Lucrecia's second child, Nina, my mom, was born in the 1940s, and much to the dismay of Lucrecia's family, to them, the child was dark. Too dark. Too dark to count as racially mixed, and certainly too dark to pass as a white Puerto Rican. Baby Nina, that is, did not pass the look behind the ears test, the Caribbean test, of seeking out the future darkness of infants. The Latinos in the room have added themselves when they get that. Even more problematic, Nina's skin tone, approximating that of 1940s African-American singer and actress Lena Horne, for you millennials, perhaps the Beyonce of her time, would complicate the family's image as disassociated from blackness. The campaign to send baby Nina away began in earnest. Lucrecia's family lobbied to have baby Nina placed for adoption with an African-American family. Any African-American family would do, so long as baby Nina was removed from the household. Only as an adult researcher would I later learn from a colleague how much the family impulse paralleled the dynamic of returning foster children like damaged goods to Puerto Rico when they become too dark. At the same time, the family's animus towards the Afro-Puerto Rican father that baby Nina favored did not extend to her older sister, Monica. Monica was lighter in complexion with long, straight hair. Monica's African ancestry did not announce itself so loudly in her appearance, and she was immediately accepted by the family. The physical comparison between the two sisters was a constant obsession of the family, with Nina being called Monito, little monkey, and Negrita Bebé, little black African-like girl. That decent translation? While Monica was lovingly called La Nina, the little girl. Nina's darker skin tone and African tresses were always viewed as problematic by the family. Her kinky curls, or what they call pelo malo, her bad hair, was a source of consternation that compelled Lucrecia to continually shave baby Nina's hair in the hope that it would grow out straighter. Told you they were good. Any infraction of Lucrecia's rules of discipline were greeted with both a beating and expression of regret for not having given her away to an African-American family at birth, along with the threat to place Nina in a foster home. Again, this was a marked contrast to the indulgence accorded her older sister Monica, with a slightly lighter skin and, more importantly, pelo lindo, pretty hair, or as we say in the US, good hair. The racialized distinctions between the two girls continued their entire lives. My own childhood experiences with how differential treatment would be accorded to me based on how mixed or black I looked on any given day or context only reinforced for me my understanding of the relevance of anti-black sentiment with its celebrations of idealized notions of mixture amongst Puerto Ricans and others. My grandmother, Lucrecia, was never happier than when my hair was greased down in 2 long braids down my back, and I looked what she fantasized an indigenous taína would look like. But her absolute preference was for me to have my hair blow dry and straight, regardless of how short in duration the look would last. My curly girls know, one day in humid weather, maybe a week with about 8 large rollers, dry hair, and a nightly scalp wrapping, a maximum stretch. However, the hair wars, as I like to call them, began in earnest when I cut off my hair in an act of adolescent independence. My grandmother was mystified as to why I would choose to have my curls spring out on display in what then resembled my mother's afro. It's much shorter than this. In my grandmother's eyes, my mother was unfortunately afflicted with overtly bad hair. But why in the world would I choose to emulate that style when she thought I had the benefit, the luxury of being better situated to beat my hair into submission of a more attractive hairstyle, or a simulation of whiteness? Every visit to her apartment on the Lower East Side of Manhattan was greeted with some version of, "Ay, ese pelo." Oh, that hair. Porque no se habló ese pelo. Why don't we do something with that hair? Wearing my hair in a short curly mop also seemed to eject me from my presumed membership in the Latino imaginary. Encountering Latino merchants and other Latino service providers, I was now constantly greeted with a surprise, "Oh, you speak Spanish? Where did you learn to speak Spanish?" My hair now barred the door to my automatic entree to Latino kinship. I now had to earn my way back into Latinaness by constantly speaking Spanish loudly and referencing my Latina culture. Like in Latin America and the Caribbean, the Latino community in the US had and has a decided vision of mixture that does not encompass tightly coiled hair and brown skin. The anti-Black slurs I heard used in the Latino community with respect to African Americans only reinforced my early impressions that Blackness was problematic despite our assertions of Latino pride in being a mixture of races. We just don't want that part of the nation. It became evident to me that cultural mestizaje pride, race mixture pride aside, not all parts of the mixture were equally welcomed or celebrated. Even outside the family nucleus, I found that there was a politics to racial mixture that living in the multi-ethnic New York City of the late 1960s and 70s did not debate. I was blessed to have attended a very dynamic Head Start program located in the Midtown West neighborhood of Manhattan, then known as Hell's Kitchen, and the backdrop for the play in the movie West Side Story. Imageries. The preschool was incredibly diverse and a delight to attend. However, when we all graduated from preschool and enrolled in the local public elementary school together, I was separated from my diverse group of friends. For the first 2 weeks of first grade, I found myself in a very chaotic classroom where we were often left unattended and where very little learning took place. This was the special education class of the 1960s. The class was filled with brown-skinned Latinos and African Americans I had never met before. I was separated from my preschool best friend Lizzie with her little sweet Irish face. I was separated from my Puerto Rican buddy Ruben, his pale white skin, nor were any of the other white-skinned Puerto Ricans from Head Start in that special ed class with me. When my mother discovered that something was not quite right with my elementary school learning situation, she intervened, and the school official claimed I was placed there because of my Spanish language education needs. This is an explanation which was most peculiar given the English-dominant African Americans in the class and the absence of any bilingual education offered while I was there. Back then, there was not a public conversation about the school-to-prison pipeline, but there was certainly a penitentiary approach to warehousing difference. Only when my mother insisted that English was my primary language and the language of my instruction in preschool was I allowed to enter a mainstream classroom where some actual teaching took place. Even after my escape from the special ed of the 1960s, which was neither special nor an education, my New York City public school education continued to operate within a pigmentocracy, where the racial mixture of Latinos was acknowledged, but closer approximations of whiteness were rewarded with presumptions of competence and intellect. This became especially clear to me when strangers did not know my Spanish surname or ethnic origin and presumed that my black-white mixture was solely due to an African-American ancestry. After a lifetime of seeing how my mixed race and multi-ethnic status did not shield me from the racism of our society, nor many others that I traveled to, it came as a surprise to me to read the work of legal scholars and others proclaiming that mixed race racial discrimination was distinct in nature from the racial discrimination that non-multiracial identified persons experience. While certainly every individual perceives racial discrimination as their own personal experience, it was still a jolt to encounter the premise of the presumed uniqueness of the discrimination against multiracial identified persons, requiring a whole new civil rights law. Because this presumption is such a disconnect from my own mixed race Puerto Rican experience with racism, I began a journey tracking down the multiracial accounts of racism for myself. The tale of why multiracial discrimination is thought to challenge traditional understandings of civil rights law has much to teach us about how to move towards a more egalitarian society. It's my hope that the insights I found in examining the multiracial discrimination cases will be illuminating for you as well, whatever your story of race may be. So that's the end of the excerpt. If you'd like, David, you let me know what you think. Should I give an example of someone else's story, one of the cases I look at in the book before we open it up to our conversation, or?
I thought what might be helpful would be if you would just state very clearly what the multiracial scholar thesis is that you essentially refute throughout the course of the book. Right? So their argument is that the discrimination against multiracial identified persons is a distinct type of racial discrimination requiring its own species of civil rights law. Is that right?
So there's a number of different people who make these claims, right? So their proposals are not all the same. But the gist of their concern is that judges collapse the identity of people in describing what goes on. And so a judge will say, Ms. Smith, a multiracial identified person, has come to court to tell us that she's experienced these different things. And then when the judge says, oh, and we think she has a case, we should have this go to trial, let's say, as a black person, so he's oversimplified. For these multiracial identified commentators, they view that move on the part of the judge as problematic. Well, one it certainly is, right? Oversimplifying someone's more complex identity is certainly problematic. But here's where I part ways with them. They think that that oversimplification means that the judge has misunderstood what has gone on in the claims. And by misunderstanding, has overlooked the existence of multiracial discrimination. I disagree. Let me give you one short example of sort of how this kind of plays itself out. Right? So, in the book, I look at the discrimination cases from the workplace, in public accommodations, in housing, in education, in criminal justice. So, each chapter is devoted to a different public sphere where discrimination can occur, where we have a body of law. One of the most, the largest area is in the workplace. People will try to fight tooth and nail for their jobs because that's what puts food on the table. So we can understand why people would bring cases more often in the employment context. All right, so what are these cases? It's by a woman named Jill Mitchell, a light-skinned woman with a black father and a white mother, and I'm using her terms to describe her. She says that based on her appearance, people presume that she's mixed. Sometimes they think she's mixed Hispanic with some European or something else, exotic as she says, but they assume some kind of mixture. She often gets that question that all racially ambiguous people get. So what are you? Where are you from? Where are you people from? So she gets a lot of that. She starts working for Champs Sports Authority in Beaumont, Texas, as a full-time management trainee. And she works there for a whole year without any kind of problems. She actually receives positive performance evaluations. But she feels that her entire work experience changes when her store manager discovers that her racial background is not just mixed, but includes African ancestry. She did not disclose her race identity on her work application and in her hiring papers, nor does she ever respond to that question. So what are you? She just kind of gave none of your business. How do they find out there's some black in the mix? Some of her relatives showed up at the job. Take her out to lunch, or give her a drive home from work, normal interactions. But the people who did were the darker skinned family members. And so like, went on to the manager, like, oh, okay, who are these people to you? Okay. And so once that happens, that discovery happens, his entire attitude towards her changes. She says that he starts to fixate on her African ancestry. Starts to make a lot of negative remarks about blackness, about black people. And at one point he says to her, like, why is it you only date black men? As if this were problematic. At one point, she overhears this very same manager say, we need to get her out of here. And sure enough, the racialized treatment continues until she is eventually demoted, and her former position as a management trainee is filled not with someone who comes from that same training program, but from one of the part-time hires. As a result, she attributes her demotion to race discrimination, and she files an employment discrimination claim. Now, I want to point out that her chances for winning her case were actually quite low. Not because of the relative merits of her claim, but because it has been documented that very few racial discrimination claims ever yield a success in these days and times, right? Where courts and the system are so seemingly hostile to racial discrimination claims. The few people who win are older white men claiming reverse discrimination. They tend to win, but everybody else, not so much. And so the vast majority of racial discrimination claims are dismissed by courts without even an opportunity for trial. You don't get to go for it. Jury reviews. So one quick data point, right? Between 1979 and 2000, 2006, federal claimants only won 15% of all job discrimination claims, and by comparison, in all their civil cases, non-criminal cases, the win rate was 51%. Okay, so this is not about, oh, litigation is hard. This is about race discrimination is hard. Now, despite an overarching challenge of persuading courts that an instance of discrimination has occurred, Jill has a petition that she brings before the judge asking for court-appointed representation. She wants the judge to give her a funded, tax-funded lawyer to represent her. Now, this is not like criminal cases that you watch on TV where everybody's got a lawyer, they get read their rights. Criminal law is different, right? Because your liberty is at stake. In non-criminal cases, you pay for a lawyer, you go to legal aid, well, you represent yourself. Right? And so a lot of people just represent themselves because they can't afford it. She asked for the court to appoint a lawyer to her and for them to pay for it. And he says yes. This is unheard of. My Rutgers colleagues are like, what? Yes, she goes before a magistrate judge, she makes her claim, and the magistrate judge says that the merits of her claim weigh in favor of granting her request. Here's the significance of that, right? He's not tipped the scales for her, right? One, he's kind of given a little hint, but he thinks there's something here to investigate, right? It's not just one of these quickie cases for dismissal. And she now gets to have the playing field level, meaning she has someone fancy to talk for her now too, because employers, the EEOC expert employers are repeat players, meaning they have lawyers all the time, right? The very same lawyers often. So they're always represented, and they've got their stuff, lined up. Not the people who feel they've been victimized by discrimination. Okay, so she has her lawyer paid for by the federal government, us taxpayers, and then suddenly the employer decides, oh, let's talk settlement. And employment discrimination, that's a win. She doesn't get dismissed, and she actually gets some financial compensation without having to go through the arduous right of actually having to go to trial. Okay. So you might think, well, why is this one of the cases that the multiracial identity commentators say is a bad case? She wins. To the extent you win discrimination law, she's winning. So why do they have a problem with this case? Because the judge, in talking about her claim, after describing her more multifaceted racial identity, says, as a black woman, he oversimplifies her discrimination. Or I should say, her identity. But I want you to keep one thing in mind. When the judge does an oversimplification, it is actually an accurate reflection of what she says happened to her based on discrimination. Not her identity, but where the discrimination happened, right? She says she identifies as mixed, that's what people presume she is. The workplace had no problem with her mixedness. They had a problem with her blackness. Being one part of the mix there. So the judge is fixated on the very thing that she said in her story was the problem. Remember, this is her telling her own story. This is not a lawyer speaking for her at this point because this is before she gets the lawyer. That's why I like to start with this case as kind of an example. So when she brings her claim and she wins, right? This is not an example of a judge being confused by her biracial identity, right? She's actually able to reach a satisfactory resolution of the case within traditional civil rights law. So that's why I say, like, at its core, her story and so many of the others that I document in the book are about non-whiteness. Non-whiteness as a problem, not about mixedness. Why don't I come up there so we can actually have a conversation so I can come back to you?
So it's a fascinating story.
It's a fascinating story, this particular case. And interesting that these scholars would raise this. On one hand, you can understand wanting to assert that there's some distinctiveness to being a mixed race person discriminated against on the basis of their race, and hoping that that discrimination can be recognized slightly apart from the traditional black-white binary. But it's fascinating to learn that the judge in this case recognizes that the black-white binary is still at the root of the discrimination being maintained. And so you still have a bit of a disconnect. Is there a way to square it? Or does your research across all sorts of different cases, this being in employment law, you also look at education, you look at housing, public accommodations, you look at other areas. You know, is the finding of this case with respect to the nature of discrimination against the complainant, as well as the treatment of the complaint by the federal court, more or less consistent?
Yes. Why don't I turn this on? Oh, okay.
That's it.
Harder. Okay. That looks like it's on, though I don't really hear the echo.
Can you turn her up a little bit?
I did drop this like my cell phone. Maybe I can cut the battery off. Or I'll just take the handheld if that's necessary. Maybe I can get that. Okay. Oh, it's not. When I dropped it, did I mess it up? Oh, okay. Okay, I'm back. So let me get myself focused again. Was this story that she told? Just so funny. Have echoes across the different contexts, not just in employment.
Yes, in terms of the complaint about the discrimination, the nature of the discrimination, and the treatment by the court.
The pattern that I described to you is not one that is unique to Jill Mitchell alone or unique to employment discrimination. That was sort of like one of the sort of fascinating discoveries in doing this journey of looking for the cases, is seeing the sort of recurrent pattern over and over again across different contexts, even in places where the claimant isn't even of African ancestry. You refer to the black-white binary. Right? Yes, that's typically happening, but I'd like to say instead it's more a white, non-white binary, because people, like I'll give you an example, there was one case in which a Filipina woman, she says she's Filipina and mixed, she doesn't say what the mixture is with, so I just have her story to tell. But she says that when she experienced some dispute in the workplace, that the white woman who was her co-worker was treated better and differently than she. Right? So even where there's no blackness, there is this binary. The binary is between the white privilege in the workplace and the non-white status. Non-white because of some aspect of mixture that's viewed as less than in its sort of racialized treatment in the workplace. And I see that as well in the other contexts.
Do they, well, can you talk a little bit about some of the differences in the cases brought across subject matter, but also in terms of their strength? Like, what makes for a particularly strong case of racial discrimination against a multiracial person? What makes, as you start fitting these things into categories, into the patterns of weaker cases?
Well, here's another interesting aspect to this research, is that in contrast to the critique, that judges don't get it, judges are messing up these cases, we need a whole new revamping of civil rights law, what I instead saw was that in some respects there was kind of almost an advantage to the multiracial identity context. What was this advantage? The advantage of having a very stark before and after story. Like those makeover magazines, right? Where, somebody real heavy and then the next day on the next page, they're really thin. It's very striking. multiracial identity cases, there's often this sort of like before and after moment. I described it for you with the Joe Mitchell case. Another space where it happens a lot to kind of vary it out a bit are in housing discrimination cases. What do I say in housing discrimination cases? A vast majority of them are filed not by multiracial persons themselves looking for an apartment or trying to buy a home, but by white grandparents and some white parents of multiracial children. And what a lot of these white grandparents say is, they lived in an apartment and they were having no problems, it was a very peaceful place to live. Their landlord, fixed things when things were broken and what happened. But when their multiracial grandchildren showed up, or when they came by to collect the rent check and they saw a picture of a multiracial grandchild sitting up on a mantelpiece, they were no longer welcome as tenants. Like quick before and after, right? Very stark. And what's also interesting here is that it's also very stark for the white grandparents, who may not think of their grandchildren in any racialized kind of way. I mean, I'm not trying to get their business, but just anticipating, that's not their reality, so it's not what they're anticipating, and yet they feel it that much more stark. Some people, when I talk to them about this, they say to me, well, Tanya, isn't it also the case that maybe a lot of these white judges are also more empathetic to the cases because they're thinking, that could be me, that could be my multiracial grandchildren? Perhaps. That I don't have any actual empirical data about because that's not something I did research on or made inquiries about or interviews. But it is an interesting speculation.
So another kind of global question is whether multiracial discrimination is primarily a problem for mixed-race persons of Black ancestry. Now, I know you just said that not all of the cases bear that out, but and that it tends to be sort of proximity to whiteness, which may be the better barometer. But as a general matter, you think about these being very unpopular, very difficult cases to bring, no matter who's bringing them. Do we see a lot of cases brought by white and Asian mixed-race persons or groups other than those people?
They're much fewer, much fewer. Social scientists might even say, those were like not representative cases because they were so few in number. It's to say the non-Black mixed race cases. Right? There's some, but what's fascinating is that even in some of these non-Black mixed race cases, Blackness still surfaces. One of the educational contexts, a young man who is a high school student in upstate New York, and he's racially harassed. It is horrific how much he's racially harassed. And he brings this, he and his mom in a discrimination case. His identity is being a mixed race Latino and white. But the racial harassment that he experiences and describes is being called the N-word, being presumed to be Black. It's constant an attribution of Blackness. Now, between you and I, in these cases, the dossiers, there's no photograph. So I don't know if this is one of those Latinos who's like, yes, I'm mixed Latino. A mixture that I don't want to delve into, just call me Latino. I have no other racial ancestry other than this. And so maybe there was already some Blackness in there, but all I have is his words. He says that he's mixed Latino and white. And what is fascinating is that he's not being called derogatory Hispanic names. When the students want to racially harass him, they use Blackness as the signifier, right? That's how we do race discrimination. And so while I try to sort of emphasize that this is about whiteness and non-whiteness, it would be disingenuous of me to not concede how much Blackness is featuring in here as part of the story, or an anti-Blackness sentiment.
And what about within Black communities? One of the favorite laments of biracial people is sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. When cases arise, either in your own research or in your research in questioning the assertions of the multiracial scholars, showing an increase or a peculiar nature of racial discrimination by non-whites against mixed-race people?
Well, I did see sort of what I would call sort of intra-racial, that is to say, within a single racial ancestry workplace, for instance. Like there's this one firefighter in Washington, D.C., Chocolate City. We used to call it Chocolate City. That's Chocolate City. But in Washington, D.C., gentrification doesn't work with me.
Tribal County.
Where he catches some heck, this guy does, right? I mean, it is significant. He gets good damages payout. He gets paid, right? In Lindsay's case, he gets paid. But back to the story. He's light-skinned. I believe he has light eyes as well. I mean, you know where that goes. It could be a triple whammy. Light eyes, and good hair. You put that together, right? And, oh, there's a quadruple, right? And he identifies as mixed-race. So the Afro-descended, black-identified co-workers give him nothing but hell. Right? Physical abuse, the fighting, right? It's more than just name calling. Right? Here's why, though, I don't view that as like, oh, this is something brand new. That anti-discrimination law can't win. This guy wins. Right? So you see another example where his law not good, his regular law but not good enough. He's winning. It's also that the story I just told you looks like old stories that I've seen long before there was this idea about multiracial identity surfacing in court cases. What is this old story? It's about light skin versus dark skin. Without any multiracial identity, but plenty of race mixture, but the same race mixture that all black people in the United States have and in the African diaspora. Right? None of us are racially pure. Right? That's a fantasy. And that's why I use this very specific term when I talk about these things, where I say multiracial identity and identify, meaning racial mixture is not new. What's new is people identifying along those lines because of being in interracial families with different race-identified parents. That is a post-Loving v. Virginia phenomena in the United States, right? It's more prevalent. So that part is new. But the way in which the racialization and the race discrimination happens, that looks like a straight up old-fashioned color discrimination case that we've long had. It's always been part of Title VII. And judges get it. And these claimants, if they have a significant case, they know. So it's not that I don't find the cases troubling, it's just that they're not troubling in a new way. They're just troubling in the same old-fashioned way that carnage, right, that happens because of concerns with white supremacy and how they play themselves out, right? Meaning, what you often see in these cases, in the just straight old-fashioned color discrimination cases, not where anyone is identifying as mixed race, but when there are darker skinned and lighter skinned people in the workplace. What you often see are stories of darker skinned co-workers or supervisors who are anticipating an assertion of white privilege on the part of light-skinned co-workers, and so they then turn it around and start doing some discrimination of their own. Right? That's not to say it justifies it or excuses it, but tries to contextualize that what's happening is still all about whiteness. It's not this new novel thing of multiraciality.
Interesting. So I'm trying to complicate. Let me ask one more question and then open it up to the audience. And this is kind of from the perspective of these multiracial identity scholars, as best I can. Could an alternative situation arise where discrimination against multiracials is distinct from anti-black discrimination, or the type of discrimination, the sort of non-white discrimination that you've described so far, but is based upon a vaguer notion of the other, right? Like a multiracial confused for an Arab in a moment of Islamophobic hysteria, or confused for someone who is simply different in an overwhelmingly homogeneous white environment?
Certainly, I mean, when people discriminate, they don't always get the facts right. They're too busy discriminating. So they're not inquiring, what are you really? They just take a guess and don't like what they guess, and then they go at it. But here's again where I part company with these people who critique and say, oh, we need something brand new. Anti-discrimination law, I'll give you the 2-second version that you don't need to go to law school for. I've saved you tons of money now. Anti-discrimination law doesn't have any racial categories. Like if you were to read the text of our statutes, you wouldn't see, oh, if someone is discriminated against because they're black, because they're Latino, because they're Asian. You don't see a list like that, because the list doesn't exist. What do you see in these statutes? The legislation is all about what? Not being treated fairly, not being treated based on merit, based on qualifications, etc., because of race. That's it. So you don't need for the discriminator to get the guess right in matching someone, let's say, who's racially ambiguous, right? So, you know, I change up the hairstyle or I slick it back, I don't spend so much time in the sun. People take different guesses. You know, I'll start hearing someone talk to me presuming that I am an Arab of Egyptian ancestry, right? You know, just start talking about, and I'm like, Habibi, slow down. I don't know all that, right? Sorry, I'm trying to keep up, but I can't do it. So, you don't always have a direct match, but the law doesn't ask for the match. The law is not concerned with the match. The law is concerned that what is discrimination? When you don't get treated in the workplace like a worker, you get treated like someone who has a race that's problematic, whatever that race may be. So, we still haven't yet seen something unique in particular about multiraciality as far as how discrimination law operates and how discrimination law is enforced. It's not that I'm hostile to like seeing something new. It's just that the record doesn't show it. And perhaps it's because discrimination is all about not being nuanced. It's about being crude. Right? It's about othering people. And so for that, where judges are willing to consider it, anti-discrimination laws is perfectly adequate. Where we have problems, like where we see losing cases, are cases where the multiracial identified person loses for the same reasons the rest of us lose. Right? The judge says, oh, well, bring me someone who, let's use a workplace case, got treated better than you, but who has the same exact job title, the same exact duties, has the same exact work week. They want to have someone to compare you to. Not because if they can get someone to compare you to, it's very easy to see, you got treated differently. But they're never satisfied with who you bring in for the comparison. It's called comparator problem. That comparator problem, everybody gets a problem with. Another former Rutgers colleague, Suzanne Goldberg, wrote about this many years ago, right? About how the comparator was kind of a whipping stick against claims of discrimination. But that was long before she was even thinking about multiracial identity. Right? So it's not that losing aspect that's not about the multiraciality. Right? It's just where judges are more hostile and they think that discrimination is never really there. It's always about something else. Oh, it's a personality dispute. Oh, it's a bad fit. You don't fit in that sphere, in that workplace. There's always some other reason.
Well, I understand the notion in the line drawing by these scholars has it been too much an academic exercise, given the real life confusion of angry racists who don't make careful distinctions. But your last point is intriguing. So what does it mean then for the multiracial person who is, say, black, white, biracial, and discriminated against and called all sorts of anti-Arab insults on the assumption by this discriminator that the person is not biracial but is instead Arab? What does it mean with them? I mean, is the plaintiff in that situation stuck in a position of having to find other multiracial people who have been mistaken for error as a comparator, or are they able to fall back on the fact that they have been discriminated because of race?
Well, two clarifications, right? Although judges often look for a comparator, that's not a legal obligation. There's nothing again in our laws that say you must have somebody to compare yourself to in order to prove discrimination. It's just a method of being able to show discrimination. Right? Why do we need methods? Because it is now pretty more rare of them. Wondering how long we'll have that for. But it traditionally has been thought to be more rare that someone would be overt in telling you that they don't think much about you or your whole country, as some heads of state would say, right? So that used to be something people would hide. And with that being hidden, we needed other devices to show discrimination. So one of the devices was like this comparator, but it's not an obligation to do that. When something like the hypothetical you come up with, where it's a mixed race person who's actually black, white ancestry, but they are mistaken for Arab in some way, the law doesn't require that there be a match. I will concede, though, that some of these very same judges, perhaps those who have a similar sentiment about shithole countries, impose without any legal precedent what is called a mismatch theory of sorts. One of my colleagues, Wendy Green, talks about this, meaning where the judge will say, well, you said this was about you being black, white, and then this person thought you were Arab, so this is not discrimination because it's about Arabness, it's not about what you really are. Well, wonder what you really are is ridiculous. Right? But that's just what the judge trying to have the it's not about discrimination trope playing itself out again. And they are very rare. Those cases are more aberrational. I point them out to say, people want to act foolish, you can find people who act foolish. But it's not because law is telling them to.
You want to take some questions from the audience?
Sure. Do you need people to have this microphone or? Oh, there's one circulating? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm curious about what the laws that have been proposed by the people that you're executing, like what those laws look like for basketball.
Okay, so there's a variation. One, I'll tell you what a couple of them are. One of the proposals of other multiracial identity scholars is that multiracial be added as a racial category to the statutes. That is a little peculiar though, because as I previously stated, there are no other races listed. So you'd be adding multiracial, but there's no black discrimination law, Latino discrimination law, Asian discrimination law, but we just had this brand new one that was unique just multi. So some of that's because people are tough in this area, but they don't really know law. Even though they want me, anyway, let me start. That's for a chat over wine. In this more sober conversation, I'll just put that to the side. Another variation that's interesting are people who say, look, this is not about people's actual race identities, right? It's about how they're perceived. So law should move away from any kind of rhetoric or language of race, and we should only talk about perception. If you're perceived in some kind of way, that's viewed as problematic, right? That's what law should be rooted in. And that has kind of an intuitive appeal, right? Say, let's stop talking about this as being the race problem. Here's where there are real limits to that proposal, to have a perception-based only form of anti-discrimination law. I'll give you an example by way of explanation. I start off the book with a guy named Cleon Brown. After I tell my own story, then I give Cleon some space. Who's Cleon? Cleon is a former police officer from Michigan. You may have heard about him, even if you don't remember his name, because he had sort of a newsworthy item a year or two ago. Michigan police police officer on the force for about 10 years. Looks white, is white identified, as far as you know, his whole family's white, they've always been white, blah, 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 blah. Decides the one Christmas, I believe it was, to do what? Like we hear on all the commercials. Take the ancestry.com test. Because he had heard that there was some Native American in the family, and he wanted to, like, Ms. Warren, find out, like, how much, and where was it, and all that kind of stuff. So he does the test, the results come back, no Native American ancestry, but voila, 18% Sub-Saharan African. He says he doesn't have a problem with this. In fact, he's sort of fascinated by it, so he goes to work. You can anticipate where this is going. He tells his co-workers, right, about what he found out. Whoa, it's where it's going, right? Why did he do that? Because then the anti-black harassment begins. Now, if it had just been about commentary, off-color, excuse the pun, commentary, then you might say, oh, well, that's just sort of rough housing, that's that toxic masculinity that is the police force, blah, 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 right, in the Midwest. But it doesn't stay there, right? It escalates. Right? So in addition to being called Kunta Kinte, a slave from roots, very imaginative, these people in Michigan, he is blocked from important job training aspects. We may not like the sound of this here, no, but he needs to get trained, do taser training in order to be promoted up to sergeant. Right? And they block him from getting access and other important meetings. Meaning his whole workplace now is being altered. Right? He's eventually demoted, and he attributes it all to this business now of them viewing him as mixed race. Now, the proposal for an appearance-based discrimination law would miss this entirely. Leon's appearance doesn't change. He still looks white. He always thought he was, that's what he was perceived as. If you Google Cleon Brown, you see the photograph. Generic white. So, nothing special. So, an appearance is why was he waiting for that And so, an appearance-based anti-discrimination law proposal, right, that comes forward wouldn't capture this. Why? Because this is about race, right? Trying to get away from the language of race in our anti-discrimination law is it is the wrong path to take. Because unfortunately, this is all about a racialization process, right? That you can't adequately talk about if you don't use race. Right? This sort of brings me back to earlier work where I'm looking at anti-discrimination law in Latin America and the pathology, right, that is Latin American ideology with regards to race. There, it's like, a perfect, maybe this is why it was so clear for me to see, is because it was echoing stuff I'd already lived, I can tell my personal story, and seen as a scholar in Latin America and the Caribbean. Right? You try to say it's not about race, what does that do? Cuts off the legs of civil rights movements trying to describe what's happening to them. You can't use race language, you're then trying to talk about it as just a class issue. That only gets you so far. Because when people who have managed to couple together some money, black soccer players in Brazil, they got money. And they still can't get a taxi cab on the streets of Rio at night. That's not about class. Right? That's just about racialization. So, those are, I've probably talked long enough in response to how animated I get. The inadequacy of the proposals that they put forth. Because, in response to your question, the bottom line, what they're really concerned about, is not really the inadequacy of racial discrimination law. It is the lack of recognition of multiracial identity. They want multiracial identity to be described loud and clear in the cases. Right? And I think that that's because I hint right from this idea about, one proposal is to add multiracial as a category to the law when there's no other races there. Because where it comes from is a carryover from the census battle. In my assessment, This is about folks who are very tied to the lobby for a multiracial identity in census forms and other data collection forms. And when what they don't win is a multiracial category in the census, what the Census Bureau said does, it says you can check as many boxes as you want, but you don't get to have a box that's labeled multiracial. That's perceived as a loss by some people in the multiracial identity activist community. And I think that's what we're seeing in this critique of anti-discrimination law is that battle now being trying to be transposed into law. And the problem is that it's an ill fit. That battle doesn't belong in anti-discrimination law. It disserves the victims, the multiracial victims of discrimination.
Thank you. Actually, you took my question, but I had another thought when you started talking about the census. How much does the census actually play into the cases? Because there are some races that are identified. For example, I'm Egyptian, and over the years I saw my race become white out of nowhere. And I was like, that's crazy because that's not how we're treated. So I'm just interested to hear how that plays out in the legal context.
The census has no specific place in anti-discrimination law, except you'll see census data sort of coming into the cases where it's not an individual story, it's a class-based story, meaning a group-based story. So where someone wants to say, look, there's a bunch of us who've been applying for jobs here. We are all of Egyptian ancestry, and instead they're only hiring people who are of Croatian ancestry. You know, some places are very marked by particular migrant groups. And we think that's based on race, or you could say based on national origin. Right? The census data, though, will come in the following ways. You would be able to help prove that this was the case, right? That there were wholesale group-based exclusions by looking at things and saying, look, here in the city of Newark, the census shows there are this many people of Egyptian ancestry of this age, meaning they are of labor market age, and of this skill base, right? The census brings in lots of data like that. And yet, you have 0 janitors of Egyptian ancestry, despite the fact that there's this statistical huge number of possible people who you can hire of Egyptian ancestry to do this job of being a janitor. That is an indicia of discrimination. But there again, it's less about, oh, you need a particular race, or racialized. It's about showing the presence and then the absence in the sphere where you say that the absence is because of discrimination.
Hi, I have a question about.
Oh, there you are. I look at someone's face with his other.
Yeah, I have a question about conceptualizing why some of this is so confusing. And so when we were talking about how sort of the push or the lobby for the multiracial distinction, I was thinking about how Professor Barbara Phillips-Smith and Racecraft talks about white mothers and why they want to make sure that their children are delineated in a particular way because they instinctively, I guess through socialization you could say, understand that there's this sort of spectrum that always leads to the discussion of anti-blackness. So I wonder whether or not, I guess, sort of discussing how we conceptualize multi-racial identity and the need to be distinctive and connecting that to sort of moving away from conceptualized blackness and why that can be very problematic if that's perhaps a tool to get to a better understanding. My second question is whether or not, which is connected to the first, when judges, for example, perhaps don't understand how this is sort of functional, the interaction that's happening, right? I wonder if stories, I immediately thought about my family in Louisiana, where we have a lot of stories of our Sicilian family who went through a racialization process that is very similar to, this will now be called becoming white, right? But many of them, after they migrated into children, even before they sort of interacted with Louisiana Creoles, their birth certificate said Negro. And so I wonder if that story of whiteness and racial formation with ethnic Europeans can be used as a tool to make people understand sort of how to conceptualize this from an anti-blackness point of view.
Okay, that was very rich, so let me see if I can keep up with you. First, I want to divulge that in the book, I do not deal with personal identity. I mean, to the extent that while there's been lots written, that there's lots of other, if you want to read about that, there's lots of other people who've written about that, right? Who have written about multiracial identity, what is this really about? Is it authentic? Is it not? What's it based on, etc. My book is not delving into the articulations of personal identity. Instead, what the book is about is the way it takes for granted people have different identities. Now, what happens when you say you have instances of discrimination? Do courts not adequately attend to your victimization? So that's my point of entrance. And my story is that no, it's not a problem. Judges do understand it. They understand racialization as a process, and our law is adequate to deal with it. Now, where the confusion arises is not the confusion on the part of the judges. I think the confusion arises more on the idea of what is discrimination for law, and really what's really at the heart of discrimination. Much earlier this evening, Professor Troutt asked me whether the cases that I talk about in the book really tell the whole story. He's trying to be nice in front of y'all, right? Meaning, cases, only so many people decide to actually bring a claim. It's work, it's draining, it takes time away from your family, you want to get it passed. So many more people, you do what? They exercise the power of exit. That is to say, they say, forget about it. I want to put this behind me. So not that many people bring claims. What am I missing by only focusing on law claims? Right? That's my methodology in the book. Well, I made a point of searching for this thing. I had research assistants who helped me do this. Some of the rooms that she knows she's talking about her. I had research assistants who helped me look for all the social media accounts. Right? Meaning, who are these post-Loving Virginia people? A lot of young kids these days, right? So where am I going to find multiracial identified people talking about themselves and about their experiences? On social media. So I did a big old search, looking at Facebook, looking at the social media sites, looking at Twitter, etc. Nothing of stories about discrimination. What there were stories of encounters with what felt like insults to dignity. Right? Meaning, a lot of perceptions of the, so what are you? Question as the problem. Now, I'm not saying the question's not a problem, but viewing that question, so what are you? As discrimination, that is incoherent. Discrimination is about exclusion for societal goods, a place to work, a place to live, at fair treatment in the criminal justice system, access to public spheres, the library, hotels, etc. Those are public accommodations. To have someone have an inquiry about your background One is not unique to multiracial people. Right? Anyone whose phenotype or hair texture or whatever looks not whatever the people think it should be in the box, right, will get the "what are you" question, or will get the resistance to what you say you are. Right? So light-skinned Latinos know this from the other end, right? Because they favor more our Spanish ancestry, right, or our Portuguese ancestry. Then they get, oh, you're not really Latino, really, but you have blue eyes, but you have blonde. And we come in that shade too. So they get that resistance. But that resistance, I'm not saying it's not problematic, but that's not discrimination. If you get that resistance and they refuse to give you the job, there's the discrimination, right? So that diminishment of the idea of discrimination down to the personal, down to just an idea of dignity, that's where I think perhaps it's also a cultural shift with this sort of me-ness of individuality expressions, that misunderstand what the nature is of actual discrimination. And I think that kind of storytelling infuses itself into the multiracial identity. Then your latter question about how much does sort of the white ethnic transformation from racialized status to a broader umbrella for whiteness, would that be a way to have people have a better sense of clarity about what's going on? I don't think they do that. I think that when the multiracial stories are told without the agenda setting of trying to have an assertion of multiracial identity, just what happened here, judges get it. Right? They see the racialization happening, and they see the obstruction from a public good that is the nature of discrimination. Yeah.
One more? Who has the mic?
I have a question.
Sorry, two more.
Okay. I'm a third-year law student at Rutgers here, and I'm a student of Professor Troutt, and I have a question as far as what advice you would give to new lawyers entering the field where they're facing, at least in this current administration, trends that are trying to chip away at disparate impact, and what your advice would be going forward for those that are trying to bring successful civil rights claims.
Well, it's interesting you should bring that up because right before we started the event, I was talking to some folks who have acquaintances who work at the state level, right? And at the state level, in the Office of Civil Rights, good things are happening. Right? Resources are being allocated. Governor Murphy cares about this, right? And so we may need people still in the federal level to be part of the resistance, if you will. But at the same time, not have to spare. There are many, not all of us have to be all in the same place at the same time. Right? That there are a lot of spheres and venues within which this work needs to happen. But the most important thing I would say is to not think of yourself as having to do it alone. I think that's the hardest thing. That's what I always try to tell my students, right? To view yourself as part of a larger community, right? And even beyond just supporting where your workplace is. There are many more of us who care about these things. And we can't let all like the Twitter war stuff be our sole framing, right, for how we feel about what's going on. That there are many more of us as well, folks of good conscience and concern who are out there that we need to be in fellowship with. And that way you keep yourself healthy and sane as you're trying to do this work.
Good evening. I have to admit I find this fascinating, perhaps even more because I never knew a movement to parse out multiracial discrimination, I guess uniracial, for lack of a better word, was a thing. And it seems, I would agree with you, it seems really misguided. It shows no appreciation for the historical context. But I also agree with Professor Hernandez, you hit the nail on the head. The binary here is white, non-white. My people are Sicilians, so when we talked about that, where people were denigrated as being Africans, and yet come here, and we become white eventually. But people I know, like in my family, who discriminate, who are Black versus Latino, Arab. And so that seems to be, I mean, I'm disagreeing with what you said. My question is, it seems to be this, there are some real unintended consequences in this movement of multiracial identification. And I know about the census thing, because it has echoes of an apartheid-era system in which you compartmentalize black and color, not for any purpose of, you know, genetic accuracy, but supposed to divide and conquer. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Well, in my more optimistic moments, I think that there can be a way to honor and respect fluid racial identity without that having to be marching hand in hand with a flee from acknowledgments of blackness and a flight from thinking about us as being all in the same social justice boat. That is to say, I think of myself in many different ways. Right? In some spaces, different aspects of my personality, my background feel more salient to me. I heard Nell Irwin Painter talk about her new book, Old in Art School. And she said something really fascinating in the book is really good as well. She said that for her blackness, her black identity has always been like a central core, right? How she identifies herself and how she thinks of herself. But after she left teaching history at Princeton, and her emeritus status, and her lucky, chair, blah, 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 and she went back to undergrad at Rutgers to do art, and then went to graduate school. All she felt on a daily basis was, oh, you know, all these young people in undergrad. And to me, all of us have a multitude within us. And I don't think that acknowledging that multitude in racialization as well necessarily needs to mean, right, that what we're trying to do is support kind of an apartheid, I'm better than you because I'm on this side and I'm in the middle or what have you. It's unfortunate though that so often the rhetoric of multiraciality has gone hand in hand with that kind of demarcation. And so, you know, Latinos, Trigueños, mulattoes, off to one side, darkness off to another. And what I refer to as a pigmentocracy, looking at skin shade along a field of hierarchy. My hope, in part, by writing the book, is also, even though where I say agnostic about people's identity, what I'm trying to show is that you can raise your identity, right? You can say what it is in the cases, right? And still be realistic about what racialization means and discrimination means, and not try to disassociate from everyone else who experiences it as well. Meaning that you two have something in common, even if your identity is sort of has a multitude within it. Because part of this also, and this is where I suppose in response to this question, is that sometimes I think part of the rhetoric about multiraciality also discounts how complex racial identity is for everyone. People who are single race identified, for example, when psychologists talk about racial identity amongst people identified as black, they constantly recount a particular kind of formation. That I learned I was black when, right? 5 years old, you got called something. 7 years old, you got excluded from something, right? That you learned what it was to be a black thigh, right, within our society with some kind of experience. Meaning that it wasn't innate, that black identity isn't inherent to you from pigment. It's a learned social account. And it's just as complex and riddled with all kinds of journeys and contextual differences. And I think when we think that that's only particular to multiracial people, we actually undercount the ways in which racial identity is just complex for everyone.
You have a final question?
Yeah, but
Professor Maldonado, did you have a question, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take these last two, and that will give us enough time to make sure that Professor Hernandez can sign some books.
Yes, I always want to say, I want to thank you now for this beautiful way of, to help me, and I need this myself, but you're right, not to take away from the racial, the multiracial or the ethnic scheme of humanity, but we're getting into the civil rights, that's the civilian, the person, which means that things like that happen to people like not ethnicity or background, but it's your human right as a person, as a human, your humanity, as an earth, and I understand. I want to thank you. This is a beautiful way to kick off African American History Month and everything. Thank you very much. And it's not that it's when you're being discriminated. When you're being discriminated against because of your color and everything, I feel as though it's not only discrimination against that one person, it's civil rights, being discriminated against everybody, every different ethnicity and background. You understand what I'm saying?
I do indeed.
Depending on the situation and what's the situation, what's the cause for the case and all that other stuff. So it brings it, and it hurts everybody, the whole world, that one person.
I agree with you.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you so much for this work. So I was actually a little bit surprised to see that Latinos are included in the category of multiracials because in the United States, the census does not recognize Latinos as a race, but rather as an ethnic group. And some of the forms that I've seen, it's Latino is not a race, it's an ethnic group, etc. And so I was wondering, in your research, how often did you see Latinos that they're both Puerto Rican, Dominican, who are describing themselves as multiracials, as opposed to what I think the U.S. Census would think of as multiracial, which is someone who is African American and is Latino, then that person would be identified as multiracial. And does it matter for purposes of your thesis?
Well, anti-discrimination law has long sort of had this interesting space for Latinos, meaning it acknowledges Latinos as being an ethnic group. And we have national origin discrimination as a feature. And so meaning you can say, oh, I was discriminated against because they didn't want any Dominicans here. So that it's about where you came from as opposed to an idea of race attached to it. But, and here I think this is another example of just how capacious anti-discrimination law is, and when judges sort of want to attend to the problem at hand. Anti-discrimination law has long allowed Latinos to situate themselves as part of a racial discrimination claim. Because what? I'll give you a perfect example. A guy named Afro-Latina worked for Medgar Evers College, the Spanish instructor, but from Panama. Afro-descendant from Panama. And he says that he was not given a promotion because all the white identified Latinos in the workplace and his supervisors were favored. And that's his language. He uses that language of white Hispanic. He says the people who were favored were from Argentina, Uruguay. Meaning, the Latinos in the room know we have a rank order for the places in Latin America to come from, and they align themselves along a racialized chain. So there you're allowed to tell a story of race, even where the Latino isn't saying that they have a particular ancestry, right? From Europe, from Africa, etc. Because we also come in Asian ancestry too, right? We got it all, right? But because Latinos are often racialized not only based their non-white appearance, but just based on the idea that they are Latino, right? How do we know this? When you call, look for an apartment, and you say your last name is Hernandez, and there's suddenly no apartments available. But your girlfriend calls who's Smith 5 seconds later, and voila, there's a bunch of apartments to look at, right? That's not based on how I look, right? That's all about that racialization of the idea. Hernandez, not welcome here. And so laws have all been able to deal with that duality, or I should say the complexity, right? You know, that Latino-ness has an ethnic origin as sort of a more clarifying aspect, but it also gets treated like a race at times, right? When people do what? When they want to otherize you and racialize you.
I just have one question, it's either yes,
Chip on in.
either yes or no. With all the comments that you have heard, with everything you have written, what we've seen, what we've came up, in your mind and in your heart, or maybe in your book, will this ever get better?
I do believe that things can get better. Not in huge, like, before and after Diet magazine photographs get Photoshop kind of a way, right? Where it looks like, ooh, wow, things are really changing. But more in gradual ways that may not feel so satisfying to us, right? But my hope is that we talking about it, we chipping away at it, right? That it keeps us getting better by generation, right? Because, you know, I was going to tell my family story. Nobody tried to give me away. Well, I didn't come out as like my white Cuban father. And that's better than how my mother was treated. And so we can see changes. It's just that they don't happen at the speed that would feel much more satisfying and in more transformative ways and dramatically that really we deserve. But it is real life. And in real life, it's not just about what we deserve or what we work for.
Good answer, thank you.
Hey, on that, thank you. Signs and books, there's a table there in the hallway, and still refreshments. Thank you again.
Thank you, Professor Troutt, Professor Hernandez, for that enlightening, moving conversation. Thank you. 18% DNA might represent a great-grandparent or grandparent. Mr. Jones. Yes. It's a pleasure to have you both here this evening. Much continued success to you both. Next Thursday, January 29th, is our annual MLK lecture. Our host for the evening will be Tanya K from the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, and our lecturer will be educator and anti-racism activist Tim Wise. Our Black History celebration begins next week too. This year's theme is hip hop, and the exhibit opens on February 7th. Please take a flyer with you. And we have a lot going on, and I heard it said one time, if you can't make them all, don't miss them all. Once again, thank you all for visiting and supporting the New York Public Library. Please enjoy the refreshments and travel safely. Thank you.